This episode of Morning Tempo is powered by Podcast Startup, the learning platform for creators with a voice. Podcast Startup covers tech, production, editing, marketing, and more. I know what it feels like to be slowed down by challenges revolving around fear, procrastination, and tech, yet I've recorded and published over 260 podcast episodes, which encompasses this podcast and The Unstarving Musician. To learn more about Podcast Startup, go to morningtempo.com/podcast startup, and to get free podcasting startup tips to your inbox. Again, visit morningtempo.com/podcast startup to learn more and to get your free podcasting startup tips. Let's do this. This is the Morning Tempo Podcast. I am your host, Rabanzo. On this podcast, I have conversations with business owners and the entrepreneurial with the slant toward creativity. It's an opportunity for you to learn with me from people who are finding success in the business world, all intended to make your entrepreneurial journey a little bit easier. Welcome to another episode, Starlings. I hope you are well. It's a beautiful day in Panama. It's a little breezy at the beach, but it's beautiful. The holidays are behind us. I hope yours were great. Mine were, except for catching a bad cold, but I'm better. I'm all better. Got to travel. It's 2022. Happy New Year to you and yours. My guest in this episode is Mike Aguilera. He's a communication expert specializing in subconscious communication techniques and rapport-building skills for business and leadership. And we are joined by my still new co-host, Jessica Ramesch. Mike's done more than 1,000 international presentations and workshops at major conventions, associations, and companies like Apple, Sun Microsystems, Cisco, HP, PG&E, McDonald's, Hilton Hotels, Lockheed, and Intel. He's a master practitioner of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. That makes him an MNLP. You may have heard of NLP. It is an advanced communication system modeled after therapists who achieved amazing results in helping people make rapid changes in their lives. Speaking of changes, the interwebs is still evolving, but one thing that hasn't changed is the benefit or the benefits of having a professional, secure, and functional website that serves the needs of your clients, both prospective and existing. And you can get help with all of that, your website that is, with design by Morning Tempo. We focus on functionality, security, email marketing, and e-commerce. We love working with small businesses and nonprofits. We also fix stuff, so if your site is broken in some way or infected with malware, we can help. To learn more and to find out if Morning Tempo is right for your website needs, visit morningtempo.com. Mike and I met while I was living in San Jose, California, and have been acquainted for close to 15 years. That stint of my life was from 99 to 2016. Ooh, that was a long time, big part of my life. We talk about some of the negative opinions that surround NLP, but then we get into this, connecting with people in 90 seconds or less, helping others feel safe in conversations with us, conversational selling, a new kind of PTSD that the pandemic has created, how to engage with family and others during the holidays. I know we just passed the holidays, but you know there's more coming, right? And he, of course, explains NLP. At the end, Jessica, my co-host, and I do an episode wrap-up. It happens pretty fast after the interview part of the conversation. I believe this was the first time that we've done that. We'll do more as we learn our way podcasting together in the future. Some more. All right. Please enjoy my conversation with Mike Aguilera and co-host Jessica Ramesch. Hey, Mike. Thanks for joining me and Jessica for the conversation today on Morning Tempo.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Of course. And I'm going to open with something that is not intended to be a gotcha question, so no, this comes from a place of total friendliness, but I've spoken to a handful of people about NLP for one reason or another in the past, and to my memory, most of them are familiar with it and maybe have even done some training on it, and there have been some negative connotations associated with it. Do you ever get any of that, and can you talk about it just briefly for anyone that might have heard some of the same that I have?
Sure, yeah. There's some people that market NLP as a way to manipulate people. And so it's been like how to do mind control and, take advantage of people. And so there is negative marketing publicity, and some people do it or have that intent. What NLP stands for is neurons in the mind alpha linguistics, your words, but also your body language, emotions, and programming. The programs are patterns that we all have uniquely to make decisions, process, to see the reality of our world. And it's modeled after therapists that we're creating amazing change in people, helping them overcome phobias, bad habits, to create action in their life. And so there's elements of NLP based on therapy techniques. And also what I've been focusing on is more of the NLP segment of the communication, how the therapists were talking to the clients, the response the clients were coming back with, the meaning of the words, more questions, to really understand the client, to start to have a different perspective. And so, yes, there are techniques that some people think, okay, this will really help you control people. But for me, it's helping you understand people to help them have a better perspective of the challenges they have or their life, or to improve the quality of their life. And a lot of that is what's called the subconscious communication, the impact your body motion has, the tone of your voice, your facial expressions. All of that are signals of communication, and also how to read people as they're sending you a lot of information back as well. Does that help?
Yeah, totally, and I appreciate that. I was thinking about a former colleague, a young woman who had some NLP training, and she used it at work a lot, and I worked for her and her husband, and she was laughing one time because she was just sort of talking about some of the things, body language, that you might emulate or mirrors in certain situations, and she says, sometimes I'll see somebody doing it to me, and I'll be thinking to myself, damn it, they're NLPing me, and it made me laugh really hard.
Yeah.
But there's some dangers with that, because I've had on one occasion somebody tell me, because I was standing with my arms like this, that I was in a defensive posture. That day I was cold.
And that happened to me as well. I mean, I was giving a presentation, and somebody in the back of the room, they were sitting there and seemed to be really into the conversation, the presentation. And then suddenly they crossed the arms and they leaned back. And so a lot of people, because of body language books and training, they have a misconception that everything that they do has a signal. It does, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're closed off or they're getting defensive. So in this case, I asked that gentleman, I stopped, because part of communication that I teach is what's called calibrating. Just watch who you're talking to. If there's some changes, then you may have to stop and ask, does that make sense? Or do you have any questions? So I asked this gentleman that crossed his arms, I go, does that make sense? Do you have any questions about what I just said? He goes, oh no, this is great. This is great. Yeah. So this is I like this stuff. I'm just hugging myself. So he might have been cold also, but don't read into everything. Ideally, the best is to, if you see a dramatic change, just simply ask, you have a question on that, or does this make sense to you? Just to check to see if the change is what you think it is, or if it's just something good or negative, or some clarification.
I like that. And I was telling Jessica that I have a good friend who's been in a lifelong career of counseling, and I've had a few conversations with him about the art of asking questions, and the art of the interview, right? And he had mentioned, to my pleasant surprise, and I think because I already bought the book, he said, you should check out this book, NLP, The Essential Guide to Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So I wanted to mention the title. I think it's Tom Dott that wrote it. I'm going to put it in a link in the show notes for anybody who wants to learn more about what we're going to be talking about. And also I'm going to lend it to Jessica, I think, because tell him what you told me and maybe what prompted your search was that I was so I'm going to ask him this questions about negative connotations, but tell him what you told me, Jessica, about your search.
I did my first search because I really had absolutely no background information on NLP. So first I'm Googling, what is NLP? What does it stand for? And then I see something that isn't from one of my trusted sources that says it has been dismissed by some as pseudoscience. Not one of my trusted sources being Wikipedia. This is what it says on Wikipedia. So I'm like, well, let me see if one of my trusted sources. So I'm Googling Neuro-Linguistic Programming, New York Times or Mayo Clinic. Like, let me see what the non-biased sort of or more scientific publications are. I'm not finding absolutely anything recent. So I'm coming into this interview despite having spent a little time doing some research with no preconceived notions and not having found anything after 2010 on this.
Yeah, it was actually, NLP was kind of founded or started in the late 70s. And it was done here in the Bay Area in Santa Cruz. And I forget the name of the therapy office or whatever, but they were modeling therapists. And so it's not scientific. They don't say, okay, we did this with 1,000 people and it worked 900 times. They just modeled it, and everyone had their own version of that model of, okay, how to use your voice, what questions to ask. And as time evolved, as people started to figure out what's working and what's not working, and what's just just some crazy idea of what's going to happen and it doesn't happen, people started to add elements of hypnosis, and then also elements of neuroscience. And so I've been doing a lot of studying in neuroscience, which is more of the emotions. But yeah, it's not scientific. It's just a methodology, a model, and you can. The way I explain it is to where people say, "Well, that makes sense. Yes, it does, but how come you're not doing it?" That makes sense. Where to stand, how to move, how to shift your voice, and why it's an impact, and the little voice pattern, the words to avoid, or questions to ask. And so, yes, there's a lot of information out there, and probably you're right. Probably recently there hasn't been much new development or any changes, just new trainers. But I've been doing this for over 20 years. And so I went through the formality of practitioner, certification, master practitioner, and training, and then continued on with other different trainers, and then got into neuroscience. And so I kind of broadened my understanding of communication, that it's not just a certain system. You have to kind of incorporate everything into it.
All right, let's get to something I think that is super relevant for when we're speaking, and it'll be post-relevant when this episode actually comes out. But now more than ever, everyone wants to feel safe around others when they're talking in a conversation because of the pandemic. And there's a big holiday in the U.S. coming up. But like how to interact with people we maybe haven't seen in a while, or people that we suspect or know have differing opinions on things that have been going on since the pandemic started, and just during the holidays. Can you give us some tips on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned to you, I'm going to be interviewed by NBC about this topic. It was going to be today, but they shifted it. So good thing it wasn't today, because it might have caused a conflict with our timing. And with communication in general, the foundation that I train and coach people in is the mindset, because your mindset will impact your voice, your words, your interaction. And so with the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of research on energy and people's reactions. And there's different doctors and scientists out there that specialize in. One of them is Dr. Stephan Porges or something like that. And he has some great interviews. And he specializes in trauma and also with autistic children. And there's a nerve within our body called the vagus nerve, not Las Vegas, it's VAGUS. And it goes from our spine, or from our brain down to around our organs, our heart, our lungs, our stomach. And so it's always sensing safety or danger. That's where we get that fight, flight, or freeze. And what I like to add in there that I train people is what I call adapt. Because if we start to feel danger, we either fight, we get aggressive and lash out. Freeze, we just don't do anything, we just immobilize. Or flight, we just take away or disappear, or just get out of the conversation. And so with the pandemic, what I through the studying that I've been doing, the research, what I've coined a term called post-pandemic traumatic stress disorder, like PSTD, like with the military. The soldier's been in combat, constant threat, seeing people around him die, and just being bombarded this day after day after day for years. The same thing has been happening with the pandemic. For almost 2 years now, we've been in life-threatening situations day and day and day. We would see on the news deaths and cases. We would go out and have to wear a mask. We see other people with masks. And with the mask also, that's part of our wiring. We want to see the full facial expressions to see if the person is safe. Are they smiling? Are they making a frown at us? With the mask on, we can't see the full face. And so there's another element of alertness and just adrenaline. And so with this constant bombardment of threat around us, it gets into like post-traumatic stress syndrome. And so what happens is the person then becomes either fight, flight, or freeze. Either they get very outraged, or they burst out, or there's road rage or rage in the stores. They just, out of character, get upset, and they don't know why. And they think that they're getting upset because someone's treating them wrong, or someone looked at them or said something wrong to them. And even our senses, when we get in a really threatening situation, our whole body reality starts to shift. We see faces differently. We think a person with a calm face is actually making a mean face at us. We shift our hearing. Our hearing actually shifts to where we hear lower sounds like growl. So we pick them up. And you probably heard people say in an argument, hey, stop yelling at me. Don't talk like that at me. And they go, I'm not yelling. I'm just talking normally. Their hearing shift. They start to amplify things because they think they're in danger. And so with people, when I'm telling and coaching people now, I tell them, because of the pandemic and the whole world, the first thing you want to do is to make people feel safe around you. And so before, I would just say, just make them build a rapport and make them feel comfortable around you. But now it has to be safe. And one way to do that is just to simply tell yourself, I'm going to make this person feel safe. You think about it, you be calm, and you just project it. And a classic example of that is with pets. If you see a little dog barking at you and it's running around and it's frightened, and you calm down and say, calm down, it's okay, and you start to pet it calmly, the dog will be calm. It'll pick up your energy, your senses, your voice, your mannerism. And so the same thing with the human animal. You stay calm and then project that calm, and the person will start to become calm. And so it's a couple of elements. One is just think to yourself, you're safe around me, you're going to be safe. You will start to talk with confidence, with warmth. And then the other element of rapport and communication that I tell people is assume rapport. Just assume you're going to like that person. Because if you think a person you're going to have a conversation with, it's sales or business or leadership relationships, if you think that person is going to be difficult or going to be a problem with the conversation, you're going to then project defense. Okay, well, I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to straighten them out. But if you say, okay, I'm going to have a good conversation with this person, it's going to be a nice person, you shift your voice, your mannerisms, everything starts to shift. You start to project warmth as if you're talking to a friend. And so if you think a conversation is going to go bad, there's that what's called the old self-fulfilling prophecy. It will go bad because you're going to be making facial expressions or get defensive, and you're not even going to know it. They're going to be micro expression. And if a person, because of the post-pandemic, is on high alert, they're going to exaggerate your expressions or your voice. And so those are two key elements just to start off with, is just assume rapport and then think about projecting that they're going to be safe around you. And then that'll start the conversation in a peaceful way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know, Mike. You're asking me to turn off a lot of the inner voices dialogue in my head.
Stop that. No, you do. It is not easy, but that's part of the pandemic, post-pandemic stress disorder that I'm talking about as well. Is you have to monitor yourself, because if someone says something to you and you go, hey, they can't talk to me like that. Is it, as you probably heard, pick your battles. Is it something that you need to be defensive about, or are you just reacting because you're under anxiety or stress, or you don't even know why, but it's because your life has changed. There's no certainty anymore because you don't know what's going to happen. Is there going to be another shutdown, another pandemic wave, or what's going to go on? So you need to monitor yourself, and part of that is just calming those inner voices, shutting them down. Yep. Or actually, what's better is have a good conversation with yourself. Because if you have bad conversations, there's a part of our subconscious mind called the reticular activating system. And it's always searching for what's important to you. That's why when you're in a crowded store and someone says, Roberto, and you hear your name out of all that noise, your mind is, and the whole senses are picking that up. If you're going to buy a new car, suddenly you start to see that car everywhere on the road, commercials and ads. It's not as if they made new cars. It's because your senses are now looking for something that's important to you. And so if you start to tell yourself those negative conversations like, I'm not good at this, or I'm bad at this, your mind is going to search to justify that. See, there's another reason why you're not good at this. See, that person's not good at it either, so you're probably not good at that. And so it's back to the self-fulfilling prophecy. You tell yourself and have bad conversations with yourself, your mind will search to justify, and because it thinks it senses that's important to you. So if you have a bad conversation, just shift it and say, okay, and have good questions. Ask yourself good questions.
Yep. It's a lot to ask, Mike. I got a lot of things going on in my head.
About Thanksgiving with family members, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering right now, how do I deal with my defensive patterns with family members, not new people where I have to, I can tell myself come into this situation intending to make people feel comfortable because I don't know them yet. But with family, we tend to fall into just patterns that we've built over years. So can neuro-linguistic programming help with that?
Yeah, one thing you can do that I advise, and you probably already know this, is to, when you get into a family gathering, make it a no politics or religion zone, because that will always derail everything. If someone starts talking about politics and then it gets into a debate.
We have to add no COVID now too, right?
Yeah, don't talk, they keep that off the conversation, everyone, unless they have a question about, this is what I'm going through and what do you think? But debates and conversations. So one is just set the stage or set the frame of the atmosphere. The other would be, if you already know that you will react in a negative way to a certain person or get defensive, then you then want to think about it differently. And one way is to search to understand, call empathy. Okay, why is that person talking to me like that? What's going on? Is it me? Is it because I'm a woman and he thinks there's a disparity there? And so just have conversations of curiosity. So why do you say that? Or tell me some more, instead of getting defensive. Hey, don't say that. Just, no, why do you say that? So why did you say this is going on? Or why are you asking me that? I'm curious. You say it in a really calm, curious tone, and the person will explain, and it might be something that you need to know that you didn't realize, or they may just be, back to the pandemic, they just may be really extra sensitive and just lashing out or saying things. And so one thing is, before you get defensive, as we talked about a little while ago, is monitor yourself. Is this really something that I should be getting defensive about, or I just have this anxiety, or I'm just upset, or every time I'm pulling from the past arguments I had with this person and I'm bringing them now, which shouldn't matter, but I'm just going to go ahead and make this person feel safe, loved, okay, and I'm just going to search to understand this person a little bit better. Why are they asking questions like that? Why are they talking like that? And so that's just the beginning. Just most people try to find a way of telling the person why they're right. Now this is my reasoning. This is what I believe, instead of saying, okay, well, give me some more, because I also do a program based on NLP neuroscience called conversational selling, the conversational selling method. And if you're always throwing information at people and bombarding them with features and benefits, or the pain and how you're going to help them, you sound like a salesperson. They're going to treat you like one. However, if you're having a conversation with somebody, then you come across as an advisor, as a consultant. So the same thing in conversations with your family. If you're just throwing information, no, this is what you should be thinking, this is what you should do, they're going to feel like you're talking down to them, or like a therapist, instead of having a conversation with them. Does that help?
I think that's going to help a lot of people.
It does. And somewhere in there, I'm going to either, I was going to throw in, well, I think the key is to have a drink before you get to the gathering, or during this moment that we just went through, the scenario we went through, you go grab another drink immediately after or before the midway point, just to make it, all goodbye, okay.
It could help, or it could make things worse.
Absolutely.
For some people, it makes it worse. Some people need to stay away from the drink.
Yeah, that's that old classic line, the drunk uncle or something like that at a party, that's always gets wild and crazy and obnoxious or weird. And so it can help or not.
Yep. Any other, you touched on it briefly, but in the closing moments that we have, is there anything that you can add to the whole conversational selling method, or why all this stuff makes a lot of sense for people who want to be able to say the right things at the meetings or at the sales presentations?
Yeah, there's, in regards to the pandemic, in making people feel safe, a few things. One is, at a holiday party or with family, when you greet somebody, greet them with their hands out, like by your side, like you're going to hug them almost, because you take up space, you're showing that you're not trying to hide anything. And then with your hands open like this, down by your waist, so that, hey, welcome, good to see you. When they see your hands, it shows that you don't have any weapons in your hands. So they start to feel safe around you, versus if you have your hands behind your back, hey, how you doing? Your hands in your pocket. It's a different emotion. People can have just a little bit of an adrenaline rush. It's just part of our biology. So just welcome people with their hands open. Meetings, presentations, gatherings, anywhere. Walking up to a stranger, hey, hi, can you help me? And that'll start to say, when I say make people feel safe, one is your projection, the other is your body motion, where you stand. And then also something that will help is your voice. We have different voice patterns, and you Roberto, with music as your background, you'll appreciate this. One technique that I train and coach people on is just simply to pause. When you pause, then there's about 7 different reasons why you want to pause. One is if you're going to have a conversation with somebody and they ask you a question and you pause, instead of coming right back with a quick response, the pause gives them the impression that you're really thinking about the question they asked you. You're being thoughtful. The other is it creates a sense of anticipation. What's he going to say next? And if you're living in a multicultural environment, different languages and different people, like where you're at right now, Roberto, when you pause, it allows a person to process what you just said, translate it into their own language, and then get ready for what you're going to say next. Because even with me, I speak a little Spanish. And so when someone starts speaking to me in Spanish, I can kind of parse out what they're saying and figure it out. But if they start speaking to me really fast in Spanish, I go, wait. I can't keep up with them. And so pausing is really powerful. And it shows that you're in control. You're not being needy. I got to get my message out. I got to tell you this. So it calms a person down. And also your voice is a musical instrument. If you're just talking, it's a bum, 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 bum. You kind of get drowned out. And if a person is having conversations with people and they get, no one listens to me. I don't know why. They just ignore me in conversations. Could be their voice might be too soft, or they just be talking almost monotone and they don't have any pauses. So to me, the pause is part of the beauty of the music. It's like dun, 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 dun. And so pausing is just one thing where people feel safe, because if they understand you, they feel safe around you. If they don't understand you, then they kind of, okay, what's this person saying, and why are they talking so fast? Or, I speak a different language. Let me try to figure out what they're saying. So just simply pausing will also help. So your body language, the way you approach people, you greet people, and your voice, and there's other voice patterns as well. One that I suggest for people right now to make people feel safe is to pause and let people process and assimilate and adjust to you and feel safe around you. And one last thing, speaking of books, we were talking about NLP. Actually, I have a book. I wrote a book. It's called Connect with Anyone in 90 Seconds or Less. So it's based on NLP. It's the mindset, the first impressions, the conversations, and follow-up. So that's on Amazon for anyone that's interested in that.
Connect with anyone in 90 seconds or less. Very nice. Well, Mike,
yes.
Great talking with you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Good questions.
Thanks, man. We'll talk to you again soon. What did you think of Mike? What did you think of that conversation?
Nice guy, right?
Yeah, he's pretty nice. He really is.
Yeah. I think people around this time of year, end of the year, are always looking for little tips and hints to better communicate with others. And I definitely, as a communicator, as a writer, that's what I do, focus on how to communicate things to people. So my feeling has always been that the world would be a better place if we would all just learn to communicate a little bit better. So in that sense, it's always helpful for people who are struggling to hear some helpful tips and tricks, things they might not have thought of before.
Yep. I had so many drinking jokes I wanted to just throw in there because we were talking about the holidays. So I was really holding back. I just want you to know.
I was going to say, for me and you, the drink thing definitely helps. But I also know people where I'm like, please come, but please do not drink.
Yeah.
Both sides in my family, let me tell you.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it either, and this is only going to work in video for the most part, but I can try and describe it. But in a video interview that I watched that he's previously done on NBC, it's a holiday, we're greeting family during the holidays, and they talk about that fist bump versus the handshake versus the hug. And I was just like, if people who aren't seeing this, I was just basically like, or you can do like I do a lot of times, just put my hands on my chest and sort of turn one shoulder toward them as though don't touch me.
Which really makes people feel good.
Yeah. They just think I'm strange.
Being Indian, what we do typically among Indian family is namaste, but I'm also, having grown up in the States, I'm a hugger. And with my friends from the U.S. and my Panamanian friends here in Panama as well, we tend to hug. But now there are a lot of people that don't want to get that close. I think the solution is, instead of shaking hands, because we don't want to really touch hands right now, it's not the best thing to be doing. I think everybody should reach out and grasp each other, grasp a person around their elbow, you're not quite coming in for the hug. You're not touching hands. This is what I think everybody should do. I know it's not going to catch on, but this is what I think everybody should do.
I like
Hi,
it.
how are you? And I'm shaking your arm, not your hand. And then our hands are still,
I like it. I can still see all of you that way.
Yes. You have like a nice little moment where you're in a bubble with that person and acknowledging them.
Yep. Very nice. I like it. Well, and we didn't mention that you are, I was going to throw this in too, and we'll have it here for the post for the wrap up, but you're going to join me and Sammy, my wife, for a little Thanksgiving celebration. And I was going to tell Mike, well, part of the solution for me is to have only people over who've been fully vaccinated.
That's always my question. I'm like, I'll come over. Is everyone vaccinated?
Yeah, I had a funny and awkward conversation with someone who's very nice, a neighbor, who I just don't know that well yet, and he is vaccinated, but he's got a girlfriend and a new roommate, and so I'm like, but seriously, they can't come if they're not vaccinated. We're going to be spending too much time in my house, So
yeah.
Anyway.
It's funny because there was a very good friend of mine who wanted to meet a group of ladies. And I was like, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And she said, everybody's vaccinated who's coming. And I was like, okay, great. But I forgot to ask other questions like, are people going to start a political conversation? And everything else that you don't want to happen happened. They started religious conversations. They started political conversations. And I was sitting there going like, what did I get myself into?
Hey, as long as they were having fun.
They were.
I usually just sort of dive out. And I didn't tell them. The other thing I was kind of laughing about, and I may have spoken to you about this before, I seem to share it more and more with my friends, and the pandemic is certainly, it's not a post-pandemic thing. It's been going on for a while, but it definitely something that came to my realization since we've been in Panama. I have some social anxiety, and I didn't even realize it. I just knew, and it seemed so obvious too, but literally, if I'm captive with like more than, I would say like 5 people in my apartment or wherever for a while, I start getting anxious. I want to leave the room, like, I mean, not just like leave and bail on all my company all night, but like, I'll excuse myself, go to the bathroom or whatever, and just to get out of the room for a minute, take a deep breath. And part of me was laughing, and I know there are people who have maybe have what they feel like or a serious issue with this, and I can only imagine that as much as I like to make fun of myself, that it's a problem for some people, and especially right now, it's just gotten worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few situations in which I've had to stop and in which I've thought to myself, wow, I'm currently, not every time I've been out, but I've had a few times where I've been like, I'm currently feeling like I don't know how to interact right now because I spent so long just sort of isolated and only interacting for months and months on just Zooms when we were really locked down here. And then being introvert, extrovert, I totally get the other thing too. Even before the pandemic, I was like that. There's sometimes being around a lot of people. I would come home from having spoken at a conference 4 or 5 days, interacting with hundreds of people on stage talking, but then also that, you come up to the table and I talk one-on-one with everybody. And it's just this constant stream of people. And I would get home and not want to talk to or see anybody for 2 weeks afterward. Yeah.
Yeah, and the odd thing of my situation is that, or me personally, talking about the social anxieties, I can do that kind of thing that you're talking about. I don't have as much experience with it as you do, but I can certainly do that. But yeah, I think probably haven't really paid much attention to it in the past, but there's a sort of an aftermath cost for it. Not a huge one for me, but like you said, you just kind of need some decompression time afterwards, right?
Yeah, and I think as long as we're recognizing what the anxiety is or what we need, then that makes it so much better because you say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to step away for a few minutes, even if it's just take a little longer in the bathroom. That works, right?
Yep. So Mike's not here, and he'll hear this if we decide to leave it in. But before we started, you're like, I don't know, I'm going to think of this guy because like it sort of sounds like one of these people that's going to be like super salesy and BS-y. What did you think after we talked to him?
He addressed that right off the bat, though, didn't he? He addressed, sounding like a salesperson as opposed to being open at asking questions and having more of a conversation rather than talking at people. So I actually found that really interesting and thought, well, obviously, he does know what he's doing in terms of communication, because I was worried about anybody who has something to promote the way that he does. He has his book, he has his practice to promote. And when they do come across, as I said earlier to you, as shystery and salesman, these are not words, they're words I'm making up, then I have a tendency to kind of just not want to hear anymore. But he was certainly the opposite of that, and he addressed it as well, very, very well.
Well, yeah, well, I know you're committed to this co-hosting, dual host experiment that we're doing because you had reservations from the outset and you still came on.
I said I'm a professional, and it's always interesting for me also to see how things go, and to try to not act like I'm coming into it with any preconceived notions. And so yeah, I think that was interesting, and I think it went great.
Well, you controlled your inner voices very well, I thought, because we were talking about that. I'm like, but I always assume somebody thinks something negative of me. This is the way I wake up, Mike. How the heck am I supposed to go in there assuming we're going to have rapport, huh?
Really? Really? Do you feel that way?
Oh, I'm exaggerating, but, I like to talk about that whole the voices in your head in the morning or whenever your head's being a little too busy. And so, of course, relaxing, yoga, meditation, these kind of things help. Doing a little bit of nothing, allowing ourselves to be bored, kind of helps with that thing. Playing music certainly helps. And I know that some people have much better control over those types of things in their head than others, or than me. But yeah, it was just it was kind of a funny dialogue in my head as as I'm listening to him, thinking about that. Oh man, but I got too many voices. I got too many negative things to say about myself, about what other people are thinking, and who the fuck do they think they are?
I totally get it. And I think sometimes I might be a little too good at not listening to the voice of reason inside me.
All right, Jessica, I know you've got some things to get to too. I think this was a good first post-rep we did. Hopefully we can do this again next time.
Love it. Absolutely.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Please help other creative entrepreneurial types find this podcast by following it on your favorite audio service. If you like what I do on this podcast and would like to help me do more with the podcast, please sign up for the Morning Tempo Insiders community newsletter. You can do so by visiting morningtempo.com. It's free. The newsletter and occasional email from me is filled with tips and insights for your creative entrepreneurial journey. It's based on experience, expertise, and knowledge of my podcast guests, various other marketing and sales pros that I follow, and personal research that I do for business. And you'll get details on the latest episodes of the podcast. And if you really like what I'm doing here, visit morningtempo.com/crowd sponsor for more information about producer and sponsorship opportunities. All right, I am out. Thank you so much for listening. Ciao for now.